The first thing Garrett Voss saw when he opened his cabin door that storm-battered evening was blood dark crimson spreading across the weathered wooden planks of his porch, mixing with the rain that hammered down from a bruised sky. His hand instinctively went to the axe he kept mounted beside the doorframe, fingers wrapping around the worn handle as his eyes tracked the source of the blood to a crumpled figure lying face down just beyond his threshold. Green skin, broad shoulders, dark hair matted with rain and mud, an orc. Garrett's jaw tightened. In the 3 years since he had left military service and claimed this homestead in the frontier borderlands between human and orc territories, he had seen exactly 2 orcs, both from a distance, both passing through the forest without stopping. The fragile peace between their peoples was maintained precisely because they stayed away from each other. And now one was bleeding on his doorstep. He should close the door, walk away, let nature take its course. But even as the thought formed, Garrett found himself stepping forward, years of battlefield medicine overriding common sense. He crouched beside the figure, noting the shallow rise and fall of breathing, the multiple wounds visible through torn leather armor. His fingers found a pulse at the throat, rapid, thready but present. The orc stirred at his touch, and Garrett jerked back instinctively. Dark eyes fluttered open, unfocused with pain and blood loss. The orc was young, he realized with a jolt, a girl, probably no more than 19 or 20, with delicate tusks barely protruding past her lower lip. Her hand shot out with surprising speed, grabbing his wrist with desperate strength. "Please." Her voice was barely a whisper, rough with pain. "My sister. She is out there. They took her. You must," she coughed, blood flecking her lips. "Protect my sister." Her eyes rolled back and her grip went slack as consciousness fled. Garrett caught her before her head could crack against the porch, his mind racing. "Sister out there. They took her." He glanced toward the dark tree line beyond his property, seeing nothing but rain and shadow. Then he looked down at the unconscious orc girl in his arms, blood still seeping from what looked like sword wounds across her back and side. Whatever had happened, whatever danger she and her sister had faced, it had been recent. And violent, cursing under his breath, Garrett scooped the girl into his arms and carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him. He laid her on the floor before his fireplace, the warmest spot in the one-room cabin, and immediately began stripping away her damaged armor. The wounds were bad, deep slashes that spoke of trained fighters, not wild animals. Someone had done this deliberately. He worked quickly, years of emergency field treatment guiding his hands. Clean the wounds, pack them with herbs to prevent infection, stitch the worst ones, bandage everything tightly. The orc girl never stirred throughout the process, her breathing remaining shallow and rapid. When he finally sat back on his heels, exhausted and blood-stained, the storm outside had intensified to a howling fury. "Protect my sister." The words echoed in his mind. He looked toward the door, imagining another orc girl out there somewhere in the rain and darkness, possibly wounded, possibly captured. The smart thing would be to wait for morning, to let the storm pass and deal with everything in daylight. But if the sister was injured like this one, she might not have until morning. Garrett strode to his storage chest, and began pulling out his old military gear. Leather armor that still fit well despite 3 years of farming and woodcutting. His sword, kept sharp and oiled out of habit. A waterproof cloak. He dressed quickly, pausing only to check on the unconscious orc girl one more time. Her color was bad, her breathing unchanged, but she was alive. He banked the fire to keep it burning steadily and grabbed a lantern from its hook. The storm hit him like a physical wall when he stepped outside, rain driving into his face with needle-sharp intensity. He raised the lantern high, sweeping it across his property toward the forest. The blood trail was already washing away, but he could see where it originated drag marks leading from the tree line, as if the girl had crawled the final distance to his door. Following the trail backward into the forest was like walking into a nightmare. The wind tore at his cloak, and lightning occasionally lit the landscape in stark white flashes. He tracked broken branches, disturbed undergrowth, and occasional spots of blood that had been sheltered enough to remain visible. The trail led deeper and deeper into the woods, far enough that Garrett began to doubt his judgment. What was he doing, tracking unknown dangers in a storm to find someone who might already be dead? Then he heard the voices. He doused his lantern immediately, moving forward in darkness guided only by the sound. 3 men, their voices carrying through the rain with the careless volume of people who believed themselves safe. Garrett crept closer until he could see the orange glow of a campfire sheltered beneath a rock overhang. The men had erected a crude lean-to, and in its shelter, they sat around their fire, passing a bottle between them. And tied to a tree at the edge of the firelight was another orc girl. She was younger than the one at his cabin, perhaps 16 or 17, with the same green skin and small tusks. Her clothes were torn, and she had a nasty bruise forming along her jaw, but her eyes were alert and defiant as she glared at her captors. The men were rough-looking characters, the sort of border raiders and deserters who preyed on travelers in the lawless frontier territories. "Should have killed them both when we had the chance," one man was saying, his words slightly slurred. "The older one put up too much of a fight." "Dead orcs do not bring bounties," another responded. "The garrison commander pays 10 gold for live captures, 5 for corpses. We let this one lead us to their settlement, collect the full bounty, then turn her in. She has not talked yet. She will. They always do." The captured orc girls spat in their direction, earning a laugh from the men. Garrett counted them carefully, 3 total, all armed with swords, one with a crossbow leaning against the rock face. Not impossible odds, but not good ones either. In his military days, he would have called for backup. Now, he was alone. He circled around their camp, moving slowly and silently, using the storm noise to mask any sound. The key was the crossbow. That weapon could kill him before he got close enough to engage. He had to neutralize it first. It took 15 agonizing minutes to position himself correctly, but finally, he was directly behind the rock face, above and behind the lean-to. The crossbow was propped within arm's reach of one raider, but the man's attention was on the bottle making its rounds. Garrett waited for the next lightning flash, timing his move perfectly. Thunder cracked overhead, and Garrett dropped from the rock, landing in the camp with his sword already drawn. He kicked the crossbow into the fire in the same motion, scattering embers and drawing startled shouts from the raiders. The closest man lunged for his weapon, but Garrett's blade was already moving, disarming him with a precise strike that sent his sword spinning away. The fight was brief and brutal. These were not trained soldiers, just thugs who relied on intimidation and superior numbers. Garrett had spent 10 years in the King's Border Legions fighting orc war bands, bandits, and rival kingdoms. Within 30 seconds, 2 raiders were on the ground nursing wounds that would not kill them but would certainly prevent them from fighting, and the third was backing away with his hands raised. "We were just following orders," the man stammered. "The garrison wants orcs captured. We were just—" "Get out of here," Garrett said coldly. "Take your friends and disappear. If I ever see any of you again, I will not be so generous." They fled into the storm, dragging their wounded companions, leaving behind their weapons and supplies. Garrett let them go, turning instead to the orc girl tied to the tree. She watched him with wide eyes, clearly uncertain whether he was a rescuer or simply a different captor. "Your sister sent me," Garrett said, sheathing his sword and kneeling to cut her bonds. "She made it to my cabin. She is hurt but alive." The girl's eyes widened further. "Kara, she lives. When I left, yes. She lost a lot of blood, but I treated her wounds." The ropes fell away and the girl immediately tried to stand, nearly collapsing as her bound legs failed to support her. Garrett caught her, steadying her. "Easy. We need to move, but not so fast you fall and break something." "I am Zara," the girl said, her voice shaking slightly. "Kara is my sister. Those men, they attacked us on the road. We were traveling to find work in the human settlements. We thought the treaty meant it was safe." Garrett's mouth tightened. The treaty technically allowed for peaceful contact between humans and orcs, but enforcement was minimal and prejudice ran deep on both sides. "Come on. We need to get back before your sister wakes up and panics." The journey back to the cabin took twice as long as the journey out, with Zara struggling to keep pace despite her obvious determination. Garrett ended up supporting half her weight for the last stretch. His respect for her sister growing. Kara had traveled this same distance with far worse injuries, and made it all the way to his door. Dawn was breaking as they finally emerged from the forest, the storm having passed during their trek. The cabin looked peaceful in the early light, smoke rising from the chimney. Garrett pushed open the door and guided Zara inside. Kara was awake, propped against the wall beside the fireplace, one hand clutching a fire poker as a makeshift weapon. Her face was drawn with pain and fever, but her eyes blazed with determination. When she saw Zara, the poker clattered to the floor. "Zara," she breathed, and then her sister was across the room, both of them crying and holding each other despite Kara's obvious pain. Garrett quietly closed the door and moved to stoke the fire, giving them their moment. Finally, Kara looked up at him, tears still streaming down her face. "You saved her. You went out in the storm and brought her back. Why?" It was a fair question. Garrett poured water into his kettle and hung it over the fire, buying time to think. "You asked me to protect your sister," he said finally. "Seemed like a promise worth keeping. I am orc. You are human. We are enemies. I've had enough of enemies." Garrett began pulling out supplies for breakfast: bread, dried meat, some eggs from his chickens. "You hungry?" Both sisters nodded mutely, and Garrett set about preparing food while they remained huddled together by the fire. As he worked, he could feel their eyes on him, could sense their confusion and wary gratitude. He did not blame them. In their position, he would be confused too. When breakfast was ready, he served it on simple wooden plates and handed them over. The sisters ate ravenously, obviously having gone days without a proper meal. Garrett ate his own portion in silence, trying not to stare at them too obviously. Now that he could see them in better light, he noticed the family resemblance: the same strong features, the same dark hair, though Zara's was shorter. Kara was clearly the older sister, with the bearing of someone who had been responsible for Zara for a while. "What happens now?" Zara asked when the food was gone, her voice small. "Will you turn us over to the garrison?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "But you cannot stay here indefinitely. This is the frontier. People notice strangers, and if word gets out that I am harboring orcs, there will be trouble." "We need to reach the human settlements east of here," Kara said, her voice still weak. "There are merchants there who hire orc laborers. We heard they pay fair wages and do not ask questions about clan affiliation. That is 3 weeks' travel from here, and you are in no condition to make it." "Then we will wait until I am healed." Garrett met her gaze, seeing the same fierce determination that had driven her to his door. "That could take a month or more. Your wounds were serious. Then we will wait a month. Kara's tusks were more visible when she set her jaw like that. We have nowhere else to go. Our clan cast us out for being too sympathetic to humans. The treaty camps will not take us because we have no sponsorship. We must reach the eastern settlements or, she broke off, glancing at her sister. Or we have nothing, Zara finished quietly. Garrett ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had saved them, which meant he was now responsible for what happened next. That was how his mind had always worked, for better or worse. Fine. You can stay until Kara is healed enough to travel. But there are conditions. Both sisters leaned forward, listening intently. First, you stay inside during the day. My nearest neighbor is 2 miles away, but people do occasionally pass by. Second, you help with chores as you are able. I cannot afford to feed 2 extra mouths without some help around the homestead. Third, if I say you need to hide, you hide immediately, no questions. Understood? They nodded in unison. Good. Now, Zara, let me look at that bruise on your face. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Kara spent most of her time sleeping and recovering, her body fighting off the infection that had set in from her wounds. Garrett changed her bandages twice daily, watching for signs of fever or worsening condition. Zara, meanwhile, proved to be remarkably helpful despite her youth. She learned quickly how to tend the chickens, draw water from the well, and perform basic cooking tasks. She was shy around Garrett at first, flinching whenever he moved too quickly, but gradually began to relax as she realized he had no intention of hurting them. By the end of the first week, Kara was well enough to sit up for extended periods and even move around the cabin slowly. Garrett fashioned a crutch for her from a sturdy branch, and she used it to hobble outside for short periods, always staying close to the cabin and retreating inside if she heard any noise from the road. You have medical training, Kara observed one evening as Garrett changed her bandages. They were alone. Zara had fallen asleep early after a long day of work. 10 years in the Border Legions, Garrett confirmed. Field medic training was mandatory for squad leaders. You fought orcs. It was not a question, but Garrett answered anyway. Yes. On the northern border, during the territorial disputes 5 years back. Did you kill many of my people? Garrett's hand stilled on the bandage he was wrapping. He met her eyes, seeing genuine curiosity rather than accusation. More than I wanted to, less than I was ordered to. That is an honest answer. Kara was quiet for a moment. I had a brother who fought in those battles. He did not come home. I am sorry. Are you truly? Garrett tied off the bandage and sat back. Yes. I am sorry for every person who dies in wars they did not start, fighting for causes they do not fully understand. I am sorry for your brother, and I am sorry for the men in my unit who did not come home either. I am sorry that your people and mine cannot seem to exist without trying to destroy each other. Kara studied him for a long moment. You are not what I expected a human to be. What did you expect? Someone crueler. Someone who would have left me on his doorstep to die, or who would have turned us over to the garrison for the bounty. My clan elders taught us that humans are incapable of honor or mercy when it comes to orcs. And my people teach that orcs are savage monsters who cannot be reasoned with. Garrett stood and moved to bank the fire for the night. Maybe we are both wrong about each other. Maybe, Kara agreed softly. The second week brought unexpected challenges. A traveling merchant stopped by the cabin, hoping to sell supplies. Garrett hurriedly sent both sisters into the small root cellar beneath the cabin's floorboards, covering the entrance with a rug and casually conducting business as if nothing was unusual. The merchant lingered longer than Garrett would have liked, chatting about local news and gossip. When he finally left, Garrett let the sisters out, finding them cramped and uncomfortable in the tiny space. "Sorry about that," he said, helping Kara out carefully. "But he is the biggest gossip in 3 counties. If he had seen you, everyone would know by tomorrow." "We understand," Kara said, though she looked shaken. "It reminded me of hiding from human patrols when we fled our clan's territory." That evening, as they ate dinner together, a simple stew, Zara had learned to make. Garrett found himself asking the question that had been bothering him. "Why did your clan cast you out? Just for being sympathetic to humans?" The sisters exchanged glances. Finally, Zara spoke up. "Kara defended a human trader who came to our settlement. Some of the warriors wanted to rob him, maybe kill him. Kara said it was wrong that we had agreed to the treaty terms. The clan chief sided with the warriors. They gave us a choice," Kara continued bitterly. "Apologize and submit to punishment, or leave and never return. I would not apologize for doing what was right. So you left. We left. I thought we could find a place among humans, that the treaty meant something. But we quickly learned that humans hate us as much as our own people hate them." She looked down at her plate. "Those raiders were not the first who attacked us. They were just the first who caught us." Garrett felt a surge of anger on their behalf, followed quickly by shame. He had benefited from the fragile peace, had built his quiet life in the borderlands without facing the same prejudices and dangers these two had encountered. "For what it is worth, there are humans in the eastern settlements who will treat you fairly. The merchant guilds there care more about good workers than species. You have been there. Once, years ago. It is not perfect, but it is better than most places." Kara nodded slowly, hope flickering in her eyes. "Then we will reach it. Somehow." By the 3rd week, Kara was well enough to walk without the crutch, though she still tired easily and her movements were careful. Garrett found himself increasingly aware of her presence in his cabin. She was remarkably intelligent, asking thoughtful questions about his life, his work, his reasons for settling in the frontier. In turn, she shared stories of orc culture, of the intricate clan politics and ancient traditions that governed her people's lives. Zara, meanwhile, had become almost confident around Garrett, teasing him gently when he burned breakfast one morning and laughing at his attempts to teach her to play a simple card game. Watching the sisters together, seeing their obvious love and devotion to each other, Garrett felt a loneliness he had been suppressing for 3 years sharpen into genuine ache. He had chosen solitude after leaving the military, had convinced himself he preferred it. But having people in his home again, having conversations and shared meals and the sound of laughter, it reminded him of everything he had been missing. One evening, as Garrett was chopping wood behind the cabin and the sisters were inside preparing dinner, he heard the sound of horses approaching. Multiple horses. He set down his axe and moved around to the front of the cabin, arriving just as 4 riders came into view, garrison soldiers. Garrett's blood ran cold. He glanced toward the cabin door, willing the sisters to stay hidden, and stepped forward to meet the riders. The lead soldier was a captain he recognized from his military days, Marcus Drake, a hard man with a reputation for following orders without question. "Garrett Voss," Captain Drake said, dismounting. "Been a while. Captain, what brings the garrison out this way, hunting raiders?" Had reports of orc sympathizers operating in the area, maybe harboring escaped orc prisoners. Drake's eyes swept over Garrett's property with professional thoroughness. "You seen anything unusual? Unusual how?" "Orcs. 2 of them sisters, probably wounded. They escaped from some raiders about 3 weeks back. There is a bounty for information leading to their capture." Garrett kept his face carefully neutral. "Have not seen any orcs. I keep to myself mostly." Drake studied him for a long moment. "Mind if we look around, just to be thorough?" It was not really a request. Garrett shrugged, playing casual. Help yourself. Nothing to see but chickens and firewood. The soldiers dismounted and began searching the property while Drake remained with Garrett, making idle conversation about old battles and shared acquaintances. Garrett forced himself to respond naturally, all while his mind raced. The root cellar would not hide the sisters. There were obvious signs of extra occupants in the cabin. Clothing, bedrolls, extra dishes. If the soldiers went inside, it was over. One soldier was heading toward the cabin door when a shout came from the tree line. "Captain, found tracks over here." Drake's attention swiveled toward the forest. "What kind of tracks?" "Boot prints, multiple sets. Looks like someone has been moving through here regularly." Garrett's hunting trips. He had been ranging further into the forest to avoid taking game too close to the cabin and potentially drawing attention. Now, those same hunting trips were giving the soldiers something to focus on besides the cabin interior. Drake mounted his horse. "Show me." He glanced back at Garrett. "Stay here. We will check this out." The soldiers rode into the forest following the tracks. Garrett waited until they were out of sight, then turned and walked calmly to the cabin. Inside, he found both sisters pressed against the wall beside the window, having clearly watched the entire encounter. "We need to go," Kara said immediately. "If they come back, they will come back," Garrett interrupted. "Those tracks lead to my hunting stands. They will realize that quickly and return." He was already moving, grabbing supplies and shoving them into packs. "We have maybe 20 minutes. "We?" Zara asked. Garrett paused, realizing what he had said. "We, not you. We." He looked at the two sisters, at their frightened faces and ready stances, and made a decision that had apparently been building for 3 weeks. "Yes. We. If you stay here, they will find you. If I stay here after you leave, they will question why I am suddenly alone with signs of guests. Either way, people die or end up in a garrison cell." He continued packing. "The only option is we all go, head east together toward the settlements. You would leave your home for us." Kara's voice was incredulous. "I would leave my home because staying puts all of us in danger, and I am not interested in seeing you captured after spending 3 weeks keeping you alive." Garrett shouldered a pack and handed another to Zara. "Besides, I was getting restless here anyway. Too quiet." Kara accepted the third pack but did not put it on. "Garrett, if you do this, you become an orc sympathizer in truth. You will never be able to return to human settlements without suspicion. Your life will become much harder. Probably." Garrett met her eyes. "I am doing it anyway. Now move." "We do not have time for debates." They left through the back of the cabin, moving into the forest on the opposite side from where the soldiers had gone. Garrett knew the terrain well from his hunting trips, leading them through a streambed to hide their tracks before cutting northeast toward the mountains. Behind them, he could hear shouts as the soldiers returned to the cabin and discovered their absence. The pursuit began within the hour. For 3 days, they moved through wilderness, always northeast, always careful to hide their trail. Garrett's military training served them well. He knew how to move without leaving obvious signs, knew which routes would be difficult for mounted soldiers to follow. But Kara was not yet fully recovered, and the hard travel was taking its toll. By the 3rd evening, she was feverish again, one of her wounds having reopened during the journey. They made camp in a cave Garrett knew, one he had used occasionally during extended hunting trips. While Zara gathered firewood, Garrett tended to Kara's wound, cleaning and rebandaging it by firelight. "I am slowing you down," Kara said quietly. "You should leave me. Take Zara to the settlements." "Not happening." "Garrett, I said not happening." He tied off the bandage perhaps more firmly than necessary. "We are all getting to the settlements, together." Kara reached out and caught his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong despite her weakness. Why are you doing this, truly? You barely know us." Garrett looked at her hand on his wrist, at her face in the firelight, and felt something shift in his chest. "Because you were willing to crawl half-dead to a stranger's door to save your sister. Because you risked everything to do what was right, even when it cost you everything. Because in 3 weeks, I have learned more about honor from you than I did in 10 years of military service." He paused. "And because somewhere along the way, I started caring about what happens to both of you." Kara's eyes widened, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then Zara returned with an armload of firewood, breaking the spell. Garrett pulled back and busied himself with preparing dinner while Kara watched him with an expression he could not quite read. That night, as Zara slept, Garrett took first watch at the cave entrance. He heard movement behind him and turned to find Kara settling beside him, wrapped in a blanket against the night chill. "You should be resting," he said. "I have rested enough." She stared out at the darkness. "I need to say something." Garrett waited. "When I crawled to your door, I expected you to kill me. When you saved me instead, I told myself it was just luck, that you were an exception. When you went after Zara, I thought perhaps you were foolish or had your own reasons." She turned to look at him. "But now you have given up your home, your safety, your entire life to help us, and I do not know how to understand that. Maybe you do not need to understand it, maybe you just need to accept it. I am not used to accepting help, especially from humans." I noticed. A faint smile crossed her face there and gone. "My people have a tradition. When someone saves your life, you owe them a life debt. It is a sacred bond not to be taken lightly. Kara, I owe you my life, Zara's life, everything." Her voice was steady, formal. "By the old laws of my people, I pledge myself to your service until the debt is repaid." "I do not want your service," Garrett said, more harshly than he intended. "I do not want a debt between us. I did what any decent person would do. But you are not any person." "You are," she broke off, struggling with words. "When I look at you, I do not see a human. I see someone who is kind and brave and honorable. I see someone another pause. Someone I trust, and trust does not come easily to me." Garrett's heart was beating too fast. "Kara, what are you saying?" She met his eyes, her face vulnerable in a way he had never seen. "I am saying that I do not want there to be a debt between us either. I want something else, but I do not know if it is possible, if you could ever," she gestured at herself. "I am orc. You are human. Our peoples hate each other. I do not hate you. What do you feel?" It was a bold question, direct in the way he had learned was characteristic of her people. Garrett could have deflected, could have kept things safe and distant. Instead, he found himself being equally honest. "I feel like I have been alone for a very long time, and suddenly I am not anymore. I feel like meeting you was the first real thing that has happened to me in years. I feel like—" He stopped, searching for words. "Like maybe all the prejudice and hatred between our peoples is just noise, and underneath it, people are just people. And some people fit together despite everything saying they should not." Kara's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers interlacing with his. Her skin was warm, her grip solid. "Some people," she repeated softly. They sat like that for a long time, holding hands and watching the night, neither speaking but both understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them. The next morning brought renewed pursuit. They spotted soldiers on the horizon and had to detour further north into the mountains, adding days to their journey. Food ran low. The weather turned cold as they climbed into higher elevations. Kara's wound continued to trouble her, though she insisted she could keep moving. On the 8th day, they ran out of options. The soldiers had somehow gotten ahead of them, cutting off the eastern route. Garrett led the sisters up a narrow mountain pass, hoping to circle around the pursuit, but they crested a ridge to find themselves trapped. Behind them, soldiers were climbing up the pass. Ahead, the ridge dropped off into a steep cliff. To either side, sheer rock faces offered no escape. "How many?" Kara asked, her voice calm despite their situation. Garrett counted. 10, maybe 12. "Can you fight that many?" "No. Not with you both to protect." Zara looked between them, fear clear on her young face. "What do we do?" Before Garrett could answer, Captain Drake emerged from among the soldiers, his expression grim. "Garrett Voss, I had hoped you were smarter than this." "Marcus." Garrett positioned himself between the soldiers and the sisters. "You do not have to do this. They are fugitives. You are harboring them. I absolutely have to do this." Drake drew his sword. "Surrender them and I will vouch for you. Say they coerced you, that you had no choice. You can go back to your life." "He is lying," Kara said quietly behind him. "They will arrest you too, I know." Garrett drew his own sword. "Marcus, walk away. You were a good officer once. Do not do this." "I am still a good officer. I follow orders." Drake gestured to his men. "Take them." The soldiers advanced. Garrett raised his sword, knowing this was a fight he could not win but determined to make it costly. Beside him, Kara moved to his left, and he realized she had picked up a fallen branch, brandishing it like a club despite her injury. Even Zara had armed herself with a rock, her face set with desperate courage. "Together," Kara said. "Together," Garrett agreed. The soldiers charged. What happened next felt like chaos and clarity mixed together. Garrett's blade flashed in the mountain sunlight, meeting steel with practiced precision. He disarmed one soldier, wounded another, bought precious seconds. Beside him, Kara fought with primal ferocity despite her wound, her improvised club connecting with a soldier's helmet hard enough to drop him. Even Zara held her ground, throwing rocks with surprising accuracy, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Garrett took a sword cut across his ribs, feeling the hot bloom of pain. Kara was driven to her knees by a shield bash. Zara cried out as a soldier grabbed her arm. This was the end. They had fought as hard as they could, but it was not enough. Then a horn sounded from somewhere down the mountain. The soldiers froze, looking back the way they had come. The horn sounded again, closer now, followed by war cries in a language Garrett did not recognize. Captain Drake's face went white. "Orc war party," he breathed. "Fall back. Defensive positions." The soldiers abandoned their attack on Garrett and the sisters, turning to face this new threat. From the lower slopes of the pass, warriors emerged, a dozen orc fighters in full battle regalia, moving with coordinated precision. Leading them was a massive male orc with tribal scars across his face and arms. "Kara, daughter of Thora," the lead warrior called out in the common tongue. "Your clan chief has learned of your exile and the injustice done to you. He has declared the punishment void and orders your return." Kara struggled to her feet, confusion clear on her face. "Chief Urza sends you." "He does. Your defense of the human traitor shamed the warriors who opposed you." When word reached him of how you were driven out, he realized his judgment was flawed. The warrior's gaze swept over the human soldiers. "And now we find you under attack. This will not stand." The orc war party advanced on the garrison soldiers. Captain Drake, realizing he was now hopelessly outnumbered, made the wise decision. "Retreat! Back to the garrison!" The soldiers fled down the pass, with the orc warriors making no move to pursue. Instead, the lead warrior approached Garrett, Kara, and Zara, his expression curious. "This is the human who sheltered you," he asked Kara. "This is Garrett Voss. He saved my life, Zara's life. He gave up everything to help us." Kara moved to Garrett's side, her hand finding his. "He is under my protection." The warrior's eyes flickered to their joined hands, and something like understanding crossed his scarred face. I see. Chief Urza offers you both sanctuary in our territory. You will be welcomed home, Kara, daughter of Thora. And Garrett. If he is under your protection, then he is under the clan's protection. The warrior's tone made it clear this was not entirely normal or comfortable for him, but he would honor it. Kara looked at Garrett, a question in her eyes. He understood what she was asking. She could go home now, could return to her people with honor restored, and he could return to human lands, rebuild his life, or they could choose something else. Where do you want to go? Garrett asked her. Where do you want to go? She countered. Garrett thought about his old cabin, his solitary life, the human settlements where he would always be viewed with suspicion now. Then he looked at Kara, at the woman who had crawled bleeding to his door and changed everything. Wherever you are, he said simply. A smile broke across Kara's face, genuine and bright. Then we will go east, to the settlements you told me about where we can both start fresh, together. The warrior raised an eyebrow. You refuse the clan's offer. I am grateful for the clan's recognition, Kara said carefully. But my path lies elsewhere now. My sister and I will make our own way with Garrett beside us. The clan will not offer again. I understand. The warrior studied them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I wish you fortune, Kara, daughter of Thora. May you find the peace that has eluded you. He looked at Garrett. Take care of her, human. She has more courage than most warriors I have known. I know, Garrett said. The war party departed, leaving the three of them alone on the mountain ridge. Zara broke the silence first. So we are still going east. We are still going east, Kara confirmed. Good. Zara grinned. I did not want to go back to the clan anyway. Too many rules. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, tending their wounds and sharing the last of their supplies. Kara's wound had reopened again during the fight, and Garrett spent a long time carefully cleaning and rebandaging it while Zara prepared a sparse dinner. You could have gone home, Garrett said as he worked. Been welcomed back with honor. That was never home, not really. Kara winced as he tightened a bandage. Home is not a place, it is people, it is feeling safe and accepted and valued. She caught his hand as he reached for more bandaging. It is what I feel when I am with you. Garrett's throat felt tight. Kara, let me finish. She took a breath. My people have another tradition. When two people decide to bond, to build a life together, they exchange vows before witnesses. They promise to stand together through hardship, to protect each other, to be partners in all things. Her tusks were very visible as she smiled nervously. I know humans have similar customs, though you call it marriage. Are you proposing to me? Is that strange? In my culture, either partner can initiate the bonding. Garrett started laughing, a slightly hysterical edge to the sound. We have known each other for less than a month. We are from different species. We are fugitives running from both our peoples. This is insane. Yes, Kara agreed calmly, but is it what you want? And there was the question, direct and honest as always. Garrett looked at her, this fierce orc woman who had survived impossible odds, who had saved her sister and trusted a stranger and fought beside him against overwhelming numbers. He thought about the 3 weeks in his cabin, about quiet conversations by firelight and shared meals, and the slow building of something he had not expected to find. He thought about holding her hand on watch, about fighting side by side, about the way his heart lifted every time she smiled. Yes, he said, it is insane and impossible and completely illogical, and yes, I want it, I want you, I want us. Kara's smile could have lit the entire mountain. Then we will bond. Not now, we need witnesses and ceremony and to be somewhere safe, but soon, when we reach the settlements. We will build a life together there. Both of you, Zara interjected from across the fire. "I am not going anywhere. You two are stuck with me." "Both of us," Kara agreed, pulling her sister close with her free arm. "We are a family now, all three of us." They reached the eastern settlements 2 weeks later, travel-worn and nearly broke, but alive and together. The merchant towns were everything Garrett had promised cosmopolitan frontier communities, where coin mattered more than species. Humans, orcs, even a few elves and dwarves, all conducting business with minimal friction. It was not perfect. There were still suspicious looks, still occasional confrontations, but it was better. It was possible. Garrett found work quickly as a guard for a merchant caravan company, his military experience and calm demeanor making him valuable. Kara and Zara were hired by a construction guild, their natural strength and endurance prized for heavy labor. The pay was modest but steady, enough to rent a small house on the outskirts of town and start building a life. 3 months after their arrival, on a clear autumn evening, they held a bonding ceremony in the small garden behind their house. The witnesses were an eclectic mix: the dwarven merchant who had hired Garrett, the orc foreman who supervised Kara's work crew, several neighbors who had become friends. The ceremony itself was a blend of human and orc traditions, vows spoken in both languages, promises made and witnessed under the open sky. When Garrett placed a braided cord around Kara's wrist, the orc symbol of bonding, and she placed a simple iron ring on his finger, the human equivalent, it felt more real and right than anything he had experienced in his previous life. They were creating something new, something that belonged to neither culture completely but to both of them entirely. "I never thought I would be here," Kara said that night as they lay together in their small house, Zara asleep in the next room. "Never thought I could have this. A home, a partner, a future." "Neither did I," Garrett admitted. "I thought I had already lived the important parts of my life, that everything afterward would just be marking time. And now I feel like everything before was just preparation, like my real life started the night you collapsed on my doorstep." Kara turned to face him in the darkness, her eyes gleaming. "You never asked, why I chose your cabin. There were 3 other homesteads closer to where we were attacked. Why did you? I saw smoke from your chimney, but more than that, I saw your garden. You had planted orc root among your vegetables. It only grows where someone has deliberately cultivated it. I thought maybe, just maybe, this is someone who does not hate us." She traced a finger along his jaw. "I was right. A garden plant saved all our lives, a garden plant, and a kind heart. And courage when it mattered most." Kara kissed him softly. "I would crawl through fire to find you again if I had to, but I am glad I do not have to. I am glad we are here together, safe. Always," Garrett promised. "Through whatever comes, together." And they were. Through that first winter, when money was tight and work was scarce, they supported each other. Through the spring, when Garrett was injured on a caravan run and Kara nursed him back to health with the same fierce dedication he had shown her. Through the summer, when Zara decided to apprentice with a blacksmith and moved to her own small room above the forge, striking out toward independence, but always returning for weekly family dinners. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. There were people in the settlements who disapproved of their relationship, who made snide comments or refused service or caused problems. There were moments when the cultural differences between them led to misunderstandings or arguments. There were times when they struggled financially, or when the political situation between humans and orcs grew tense, and they worried about what it might mean for them. But there were also triumphs. Garrett was promoted to caravan master, leading expeditions across the frontier and earning enough to buy their small house outright. Kara became a master builder, her designs sought after by merchants and nobles alike. Zara proved to have remarkable talent with metalwork, creating beautiful and functional pieces that sold for premium prices. 5 years after their bonding, Kara came to Garrett with news that changed everything again. "I am pregnant," she said simply, her hand resting on her stomach. Garrett stared at her, processing. He had known intellectually that human-orc pairings could produce children. It was rare but not unheard of, but he had not truly considered what it might mean for them. How do you feel about that?" Terrified, Kara admitted. "Excited. Worried about 100 things, but also happy, so happy." She looked at him. "How do you feel?" Garrett pulled her close, his mind still reeling but his heart certain. "The same, all of it." He kissed her forehead. "We are going to be parents. We have no idea what we are doing. None at all. The baby might look more orc or more human or somewhere in between. And they will be perfect regardless." Kara laughed, the sound slightly watery. "You always know what to say. I just tell the truth." Their daughter was born the following spring, during a thunderstorm that reminded Garrett eerily of the night Kara had collapsed on his doorstep. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Garrett genuinely feared he might lose them both. But Kara was strong. She had always been strong, and when the midwife finally placed a squalling infant in her arms, Garrett felt something in his chest expand beyond what he thought possible. The baby had green-tinted skin lighter than Kara's, small tusks barely visible, and her father's dark hair. She was beautiful and strange and absolutely theirs. "What should we name her?" Kara asked, exhausted but radiant. Garrett thought about everything that had brought them to this moment, about blood on his doorstep and desperate words in the rain, about a plea that had changed 3 lives forever. "Area," he said. "It means song or melody, something beautiful that brings people together." "Area," Kara repeated, testing the name. "Yes, Area Voss." She looked up at him. "Is that right, that she takes your family name?" "She takes both our names," Garrett said firmly. "Area of House Voss and Clan Thora. She belongs to both our peoples, carries both our heritages." Zara, who had been waiting anxiously outside, burst into the room the moment she was allowed, cooing over her new niece with uninhibited joy. "She is perfect, absolutely perfect. I am going to teach her everything: fighting, building, metalwork, all of it." "She is 6 hours old," Garrett pointed out. "Never too early to start planning." They settled into life as parents with the same determination they had brought to everything else, learning as they went, making mistakes, figuring things out together. Arya proved to be a healthy, energetic child who combined her mother's stubbornness with her father's analytical mind in ways both delightful and occasionally frustrating. The settlement's reaction to Arya was mixed. Some neighbors celebrated the new baby, bringing gifts and congratulations. Others were less welcoming, their prejudices extending to an innocent child. There was one particularly ugly incident when Arya was 2 years old, involving another child's parent refusing to let their son play with her because of her heritage. Garrett found Kara in their garden that evening, furiously weeding with more force than necessary. "I want to burn their house down," she said without preamble. "Just light the whole thing on fire and watch it burn." Understandable, but probably counterproductive. She is a baby, Garrett. A sweet, innocent child. And they looked at her like she was. Kara's voice broke, and Garrett pulled her against him, holding tight while she fought back tears. "I know, and it is not fair and it is not right, and if I could fix it, I would." He stroked her hair gently. "But we knew this would be hard. We knew people would judge her for being different. How do we protect her from that? We do not. Not completely." Garrett pulled back to look at her face. "But we teach her she is valuable regardless of what anyone else thinks." We surround her with people who see her worth. We build a life so full of love and support that the hatred becomes just noise. He smiled slightly. The same way we built our life together. Kara nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. You are right. I want everything to be perfect for her. It will never be perfect, but it will be good, and she will be strong like her mother. As Arya grew, she proved Garrett right. She was indeed strong, both physically and emotionally, meeting the world with open curiosity and stubborn determination. By the time she was 5, she had a close group of friends, both human and orc children, whose parents had the wisdom to see past prejudice. She excelled in her lessons, showing particular aptitude for languages and negotiation, often mediating disputes between her playmates with impressive diplomacy. She is going to be a traitor, Zara predicted one evening over dinner, watching Arya convince her parents she deserved an extra sweet cake through a combination of logic and charm. Or maybe an ambassador. She is 5, Kara protested, but she was smiling. And already better at negotiation than most adults I know, Garrett added. The years continued to pass, marked by the normal rhythms of family life. Birthdays and holidays, scraped knees and childhood illnesses, school performances and friend dramas. Garrett's work expanded to include training younger guards, passing on his skills to a new generation. Kara took on larger and more complex building projects, her reputation growing beyond the settlement. Zara eventually married a human carpenter named Tom, their wedding a joyous celebration that brought together their extended chosen family. Through it all, Garrett and Kara remained the solid center, their bond deepening with each passing year. They still disagreed sometimes, still had moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they had learned how to navigate those conflicts with honesty and respect. They had built something that lasted, something that weathered storms and only grew stronger. When Arya was 10 years old, she came to her parents with a question that had clearly been troubling her. Am I human or orc? She asked bluntly at dinner one evening. Garrett and Kara exchanged glances. They had known this question was coming eventually. Both, Kara said. You are both. But people always want to know which one, like I have to choose. You do not have to choose anything, Garrett said firmly. You are human and orc, and that is not a contradiction or a problem. That is just who you are. But what if, Arya's voice was small, what if neither group really accepts me? What if I am always too orc for humans and too human for orcs? Kara reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand. Then you make your own group. You find people who accept you as you are, all of you, and you build your family from those people. She squeezed gently. That is what your father and I did. That is what we have always done. Your mother is right, Garrett added. Our family is not traditional. It never has been. We are human and orc and everything in between. We are blood family and chosen family. And we are strong because of our differences, not in spite of them. Arya thought about that, her young face serious. So I get to decide what I am, not other people. Exactly. You get to decide who you are and who you want to be, and we will support you no matter what. Their daughter smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Okay, then I am Arya. That is enough. That is more than enough, Kara said. That is everything. The conversation marked a turning point for Arya. She grew more confident in her own identity, less concerned with fitting into others' expectations. She began studying both human and orc cultures with serious intent, learning languages and histories and traditions from both sides of her heritage. By the time she was 15, she was fluent in 3 languages and could navigate cultural complexities that confused most adults. She also began asking questions about how her parents had met, wanting to know the full story. Garrett and Kara sat her down one evening, and told her everything: the blood on the doorstep, the desperate plea, the raiders and the flight and the soldiers, the bonding ceremony and the struggles and the triumphs. Arya listened with wide eyes, occasionally asking clarifying questions until the story was complete. Then she sat quietly for a long moment, processing. "You gave up everything for each other," she said finally. "Your home, your safety, everything." "We gained more than we lost," Kara said gently. "But you could have been killed multiple times. What if the soldiers had caught you? What if those raiders had killed you both?" "Then we would have died trying to build something better," Garrett said simply. "Sometimes the risk is worth it. Sometimes you find something so important that you will do anything to protect it." "Like you," Kara added, pulling Arya close. "You were worth every risk we took, every hardship we endured. You are the proof that different peoples can come together and create something beautiful." Arya hugged them both fiercely. "I am going to make you proud. I am going to help build a world where other people like me do not have to be so rare, where humans and orcs do not have to risk everything just to love each other." "You already make us proud," Garrett said, his voice thick. Every single day. The years that followed saw Arya growing into a remarkable young woman. She pursued formal education in diplomacy and trade, earning recognition for her skill in bridging cultural divides. By 18, she was working as an assistant to a prominent merchant negotiating trade agreements between human and orc territories, using her unique background to facilitate understanding between groups that had been enemies for generations. Watching her work, seeing her confidence and competence, Garrett often reflected on how far they had all come. From that stormy night when a bleeding orc girl had collapsed on his doorstep to this: a thriving family, a respected place in their community, a daughter who was changing the world. It seemed impossible, miraculous even. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked Kara one evening as they sat in their garden watching the sunset. Arya was away on a diplomatic mission. Zara was at her own home with Tom and their 2 children, and the house was unusually quiet. "Regret what?" "Leaving your clan, giving up the chance to return, building this life instead." Kara looked at him, her face lined now with age and experience but still beautiful to him. "Never, not once." She took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his in a gesture that had become second nature over 20 years together. "This life, this family, it is everything I never knew I wanted and everything I will always be grateful for. Even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The hard parts proved it was real, that it mattered." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Besides, if I had gone back to the clan, I would have missed out on the best parts of my life. I would have missed watching Arya grow up. I would have missed building this home with you. I would have missed every morning waking up beside the person who makes me whole." Garrett kissed the top of her head, feeling the familiar swell of affection and gratitude. "I love you. After all these years, through everything, I love you more than I did at the beginning. Good. Because you are stuck with me for however many years we have left." Kara smiled. "The oath we swore was until death, remember? You are not getting rid of me easily. I would never want to." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sounds of the settlement voices calling, hammers ringing, life continuing. Their life, built piece by piece from desperation and hope and stubborn determination. Garrett thought back to that night 20 years ago, to the blood on his doorstep and the whispered plea, "Protect my sister." Those 3 words had changed everything, had set in motion a chain of events that led to this moment. He had protected Zara, yes, but he had also found Kara. Had found love and family and purpose. "What are you thinking?" Kara asked, always attuned to his moods. That I would do it all again. Every single part, every hardship, every risk. I would do it all again to end up here with you. Kara lifted her head to look at him properly, her eyes shining. So would I. 1,000 times over. They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, two people from different worlds who had built their own world together. Around them, their garden bloomed with plants from both human and orc traditions, a living symbol of what they had created. Inside their house waited mementos of their life together, Arya's childhood drawings, gifts from friends, tools from their respective trades, the braided cord and iron ring from their bonding ceremony still displayed on a shelf. It was not a perfect life. They still faced prejudice sometimes, still dealt with people who disapproved of their relationship. The political situation between humans and orcs remained complicated, with periods of tension and occasional conflict. But they had built something strong enough to weather those storms, something rooted deep enough to endure. As they finally stood to go inside, Kara paused at the doorway, looking back at the garden they had cultivated together. "Do you remember what I said that first night? About owing you a life debt, I remember, and I remember telling you I did not want a debt between us. You were right, it was never about debt." Kara turned to face him fully. "It was about choice. I chose you every day from that night forward. I chose us. And I would make that same choice tomorrow and every day after until I cannot choose any more." "As would I," Garrett said softly. "As would I." They went inside together, closing the door on the darkening evening, two souls who had found each other across the divide of species and prejudice and war. Their story was not the typical romance of ballads and fairy tales. It was messier, harder, more complicated. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it had given them more than either had dreamed possible. In the years that followed, they watched Arya's career flourish, watched her negotiate trade agreements that brought prosperity to both human and orc communities. They welcomed grandchildren. Zara had 4 by the time she was done, each one a delight and a handful. They saw the settlements grow and change, becoming more accepting of mixed relationships as success stories like theirs became more common. Garrett eventually retired from caravan work, his body no longer up to the physical demands, and took up teaching instead. He trained young guards and merchants in navigation, negotiation, and the basics of cultural sensitivity. Kara continued building for several more years before arthritis forced her to transition to design work, creating plans that younger builders executed. Through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense, supporting each other through the challenges of aging, celebrating each small triumph, finding joy in simple moments together. Morning coffee in the garden, evening walks through the settlement, quiet conversations by the fireplace when winter made going outside uninviting. On their 30th bonding anniversary, Arya organized a celebration that brought together everyone whose lives they had touched. Friends, former colleagues, neighbors, Zara's entire family, even a few members of Kara's original clan who had made the journey to honor her. The small house could not contain everyone, so they spread into the garden and the street beyond. A chaotic, joyful gathering of humans and orcs and mixed families, all celebrating what two people had built. Garrett stood with Kara at the center of it all, overwhelmed by the evidence of their impact. "We did this," he said, gesturing at the crowd. "All these connections, all these relationships that would not exist if you had not crawled to my door that night. We did this," Kara agreed. "Together." Their daughter stood to make a speech, her diplomatic training evident in her poise and eloquence. "My parents taught me that love is not limited by species or tradition, or what society says is acceptable. They taught me that family is who you choose and who chooses you back. They taught me that the bravest thing you can do is build something new rather than accept something broken. She raised her glass. To Garrett and Kara, my parents, my heroes, the people who showed me what is possible when you refuse to accept the world as it is and instead work to create the world as it should be. The crowd cheered, and Garrett felt Kara lean against him, her hand finding his as it always did. 30 years together, and the touch still felt like coming home. As the celebration continued around them, as their family and friends laughed and talked and built new connections, Garrett reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with blood and desperation, with a whispered plea in the darkness. But it had grown into something neither of them could have imagined, a legacy of love and acceptance that rippled out far beyond their small family. "Thank you," he said to Kara, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the noise of the party. "For what? For choosing my door, for trusting me, for building this life with me." Kara looked up at him, her eyes crinkling with the smile he knew so well. "Thank you for opening the door. For seeing past what I was to who I could be. For loving me when it would have been easier to hate me. It was never easier to hate you. From the moment I saw you fighting to survive, fighting to save your sister, it was always easier to love you." They kissed, oblivious to the cheers and good-natured teasing from their guests. At that moment, they were simply two people who had found each other against all odds and built something that would outlast them both. Their love had started a quiet revolution in the frontier settlements, proving that the old hatreds did not have to continue, that different peoples could not only coexist, but thrive together. The party continued late into the night, and when it finally ended, when the last guest had departed and Arya had helped them clean up and said her goodbyes, Garrett and Kara found themselves alone in their garden once more. The same place they had sat countless evenings, the same comfortable silence between them. 30 years, Kara mused. It seems like forever and like no time at all. "I know what you mean." Garrett looked at their house, at the life they had built. "Do you think we did enough? Made enough of a difference? Look at what we created. Look at Arya, at the work she is doing. Look at all those people tonight, humans and orcs, mixed couples, families like ours that would not exist without what we started." Kara took his hand. "We did more than enough. We did everything that mattered." And she was right. Their story was not the grand, dramatic romance of legends. It was something quieter, more personal, but no less significant. It was about two people choosing each other every day, about building something lasting from moments of connection and vulnerability. It was about love that crossed boundaries and broke down walls, one small act of kindness at a time. As they went inside for the last time that night, Garrett paused at the doorway, the same doorway where Kara had collapsed 3 decades before. He thought about that younger version of himself, opening the door to find a bleeding orc girl on his porch. If he could go back and tell that man what would come from that single moment of compassion, would he believe it? Probably not. The story was too unlikely, too impossible. But it had happened anyway, proof that sometimes the most important moments in life come when you choose kindness over fear, connection over division, love over hate. "Coming," Kara called from inside. Garrett smiled and followed her in, closing the door behind him on the night and all it represented. Inside waited warmth and comfort, and the person he loved most in the world. Inside was home, built over 30 years of choosing each other, of refusing to let the world's prejudices dictate their happiness. Outside, the settlement slept peacefully, unaware that in one small house on the edge of town, a remarkable love story was continuing to unfold. It had begun with blood on a doorstep and a desperate plea for help. It had grown through trial and danger and determined courage into something unshakable. And it would continue through whatever years remained to them, a testament to the power of choosing love in a world that often preached hate. The orc girl had Bled on his doorstep and whispered a plea to protect her sister. In saving them both, Garrett Voss had found salvation of his own, had discovered that the greatest adventures and deepest loves come when you open your door to the impossible and decide to build something new. Their story was not over. They would continue to wake each morning beside each other, would continue to find joy in simple moments and strength in their bond. But the foundation was secure, built on that first act of unexpected kindness, and reinforced by 3 decades of choosing each other. Whatever challenges remained, they would face together as they always had. And in that, they had already won everything that mattered.